Digital.
Control-Alt-Delete. Got to open the task manager.
Have you ever been hurt? Have you ever been in a car accident? We need to call. We're going to talk about being hurt today. Being hurt isn't good if it hasn't happened to you and you want to really make some results and push and progress and not have stagnation. It may not be serious, but chances are you may run into a mild injury at some point in your life. So today we're going to cover, obviously, in our reach of things we do know, the aptly titled, physiological things to do with injuries, and kind of the mental things to do with injuries. Everybody listening, raise your hand if you've had an injury.
Let's go over everybody's injury history.
I'll go first because it's light.
Okay.
And I've mentioned this in other podcasts. The reason my injury history is light because I back off.
Hold on. Are we talking only related to lifting or just everything? Let's keep it to lifting.
Let's keep it to lifting.
Yeah.
All right. So my first lifting injury. My first lifting injury. Everybody's gonna laugh. It was 2009, and I was like doing I was trying to do 135 on what the fuck is that thing called? A straight a barbell curl. And I don't call it a barbell anymore. I call it an illegal bar, Texas bar or something. I call it just a bar. And I ended up getting some tennis elbow. That was my first one. And then the healing process, it was cortisone shot or just don't. And I just didn't do biceps for probably I think it was 6 months. I just didn't do anything. And then powerlifting, I've had little ligament knickknacks here and there, but I mean, all of my injuries have been of that same relative seriousness. I've never had a real serious surgery needing injury, and even those little ones, they are psychologically hard. I mean, the little ones. I mean, when they're really no big issue. So I couldn't imagine. I know Jake had some serious hip things. This sounds like a complaint cast. I hurt my arm when I was a nom.
I think it's relevant. It's relevant to go over the history of injuries because it'll give us all a different perspective.
Yeah.
Opening the discussion.
Well, let me give it to Jake next before you go.
Okay. Well, this wasn't actually didn't occur while lifting, but I feel like it's relevant. I played football in high school and I broke my ankle. So there's that one.
Yeah, I've never broken anything.
Yeah.
Knock on
lingering.
Genghis.
Yeah, and it is actually. I kept wondering why it is actually my right ankle, and that's the one that pops all the time.
It's propping.
And then this was also not while lifting, but it was while I was sprinting. So I guess doing cardio, I pulled is it my left or right hamstring. So then I didn't train legs for 3 months. And then my second prep, I was deadlifting 405 for reps, and I felt like I pulled my back in half. And yes, my back is still messed up.
Turns out you just shit your pants.
Yeah, it was just poop.
He just ripped his underwear in half.
It was just a really dry poop. It's weird.
Sawdust.
Man, I think I poop my pants sometimes.
Oh yeah, I have.
Yeah,
I have without a doubt.
Actually,
I
have to interject
never
here.
Actually happened
because I've caught you doing it in the garage, and I've done it myself. There's nothing quite like being on the fence, teetering on the fence of having to kind of fart and then pulling a deadlift and getting the real force ones.
It's pressurized
like a wet butthole.
God,
got the CO2 tank fart.
Especially a conventional pool squeeze.
Oh God.
And in the gutter.
All right, this podcast is
it's
over.
A dangerous game. And then we're back to talking about injuries, by the way. not poop.
Yeah.
I guess the most recent one would be a hip impingement, which I actually got X-rayed. So basically,
turns out I was just pooping your hip.
Yeah, it was poop hip. Got the old poop hip. with a PIP.
Pippy.
The doctor diagnosed with PIP, and then I had to give up lifting.
It's like PRP.
Yeah,
Except
right.
there's no centrifuging. It's just a recirculation of the air.
Yes.
You lift in a bubble.
Oh,
He's still doing 4 videos building blocks with Pippy.
that's how much I love you guys. I've got PIP, and I'm still doing form videos for everybody. I'm secretly dying in every.
Yep.
I can't breathe.
It's just
God.
all I can do to keep a straight face in those
You're
videos.
wasting people's time.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be talking about Pip.
Pip.
Let's just name the podcast Pippy.
Pippy Longstocking?
Yep, definitely.
Okay.
Pippy Longstocking. What name?
That's
Hip.
it.
How's your hip?
How's your
When was that hip? Say 8 months ago?
Yeah, it was probably like 6-8 months or something. And then they said that it could have been also possibly a torn labrum, which basically you just have to get surgery for.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, I don't want to do that. And then I just kept lifting, and it still hurts a little bit, but I deal with it.
Grind that shit, right, guys?
To an extent.
What I'm famous for.
Probably best to not grind that shit, actually.
Yeah, don't grind your PIP.
Yeah, or bone on bone. It's not good to grind that shit either.
Oh, the old Pippy, why, old Pippy, why?
Oh my god.
Ben's enumeration.
Yeah. Well, so I used to ride BMX bikes, so obviously there's a history of that, which I'm not going to get into. But
If you had a number, though, from just BMX injuries.
I was lucky in that I never had super serious ones, like...
Because those guys get torn the fuck
Oh,
up.
yeah, like usually numerous concussions,
Yeah.
and obviously my shins, people think it's deadlifting, but that's all from bike pedals and missing, like slipping a pedal. Separated both shoulders at the same time. Knocked my tooth up into my
Jesus.
gum, this one. But yeah, I never had really anything serious beyond that. But I guess, that mentality, that extreme thrill-seeking mentality kind of carries with you. So, yeah, I guess let's start at the top of the body for lifting based. I've had tendonitis, pec tendonitis. I've had bursitis in both shoulders. I've tore both triceps, my right one this year.
You didn't even know what's going on, man.
I knew it wasn't like a full tear. It just felt like it was kind of in chronic contraction, and then it just felt like something was actually out of place, like someone kind of moved my long head where it shouldn't have been. So it was a partial tear. And actually both sides are partial tears. I think I have a hernia, but I've never gone to get it checked.
Jeez.
I had dual adductor tendonitis, dual quad tendonitis at the same time, hip bursitis, and then at one point all 5 of my lumbar discs were bulging, and now I have arthritic changes in my SI joint. So I think that's pretty much everything.
So, all Pip jokes aside, it sounds like that we have all had some injuries, some more serious than the others, but I think the fundamental thing we have in common is that why haven't we become the guy who you meet in a GNC or an LA Fitness that says, I used to this, but I got injured, and that's the end of his chapter.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think the fundamental difference is, whether it be the approach in any way, mentally or actual PT, I guess, way to kind of cure us to keep going, because we're still in it, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, what do you think those things are really for people that...
One thing I would say, and I think that Ben would agree with, is just as far as mentally, take responsibility yourself and invest in it yourself.
A lot of people don't want to admit that most injuries are their fault.
Yep.
Yeah. So that seek professional help where applicable, but also try to do a decent amount of research and learning about it, because at the end of the day, even a professional, a lot of the times, nobody's going to care about it as much as you care about your own
100%.
body. Yeah. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of, as Ben could attest to, probably,
Misdirection, frustration.
yeah.
So,
yeah.
kind of a question for Ben. And the first thing you said, and it was, I don't want to breeze over, and I think it actually should kind of be our first kind of topic. It said kind of accepting the responsibility, or not responsibility. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You said kind of accepting it that you have an injury. Was that kind of what you said?
Sure. I guess you could put it like that. Yeah, I guess that could almost even go into like knowing your limits or something like that. I don't know.
I think the part I'm getting to, and sorry if I'm just being purposely leading.
I want to answer that question that you asked before about why people, why you meet usually the has-beens.
Oh yeah, before we skip on, answer that one.
Yeah. I do think it's a multi-level psychological thing, but I do think that oftentimes it's a convenient way out for a lot of people, because they're kind of already on the fencing it, where it's like, I kind of like this, but let me think of an analogy. It's almost like when you're younger and you're forced to play certain sports that you don't want to play, and then your parents finally give you the choice. You know what I mean? Then you're like, all right, I won't play.
Yeah.
Yeah, you instantly can use that as a something to...
Yeah.
But
Because
then that's not accepting responsibility. I guess it does tie in to some degree.
it does. Yeah, and then I guess to get it right back up to speed where what we were talking about, is I do think it's particularly hard to find somebody who's quite as invested in whatever that activity is as you are, because again, referencing back to previous podcasts, we aren't NFL players.
Yeah.
Like we don't have a trainer or physical therapist who's isolated just to get us back on the field.
We're just out there kind of alone, and the injuries can be the same.
Yeah, and you are really your own advocate. And again, it kind of is what Jake was saying, is you have to fight for truth. I was even thinking about this, and man, I will stop after this because I don't want to go too far off the path of this. But
No, you're good, Pippi.
Obviously, a general theme of people in our lives, or just occurrences of what's going on with the whole cancer wave, is like that's a big thing too, in that you have to be your own advocate, because if not, you're at the will of whatever the physician's opinion is. And that applies to things, obviously not, this isn't quite as extreme as cancer, not nearly as extreme as cancer, but the point I'm getting at is that if you're kind of being pacified by a medical professional, because oftentimes what's the thing you get? You go in, you say, I got this injury from lifting. They say, well, just stop lifting.
And that's it.
Yep.
That's like again, the NFL, physician saying,
they say
just retire.
Yeah.
You're 20. You know what? You got a little sprain in your ankle. Just retire. Don't go back. And yeah, I don't think that's a real logical or helpful intervention to somebody. So I'll let us get to the next point, because I'm sure we'll get back to some of these themes that are in my head.
I was just thinking of an example. If anybody who listens to Louis C.K., he has this bit where he's talking about, he goes to the doctor and his ankle's like messed up, and his doctor tells him like, take like 20 aspirin a day.
It's like Dr. Wareheim.
Yeah. It's like, are you sure that's okay?
Let me analyze it in my home lab.
One book that we've I think only I've read in this house so far. Plato has his book called The Symposium, and we've mentioned it slightly in this house. And a quick synopsis of it, if you guys don't know Plato the philosopher, he was a student of Socrates, and he wrote, everything he wrote was as if he told his stories through Socrates. That's how much he loved him. So anyways, Symposium goes through basically a symposium, people talking, open forum, kind of like how this podcast is, on definitions of love and what love is, and it's awesome. It gives a lot of I guess perspectives of love, and this I think is important because I've thought about this. One section they talk about, I won't get into it, you can read it if you'd like to, is when they talk about people's loves of things, love of pizza, love of chair. And I think lifting is weird because lifting is it's a love as well. So there's one thing when you lose it and you just can't compete, or you just can't feel better from exercising, but an injury is also like a breakup with or losing a loved one in a sense, because it's something that you are like madly in love with that it's taken from you overnight sometimes.
And in that same vein, you're losing, just like a bad breakup, you're losing a part of yourself that you liked. And that's not an easy thing, because really whenever you identify with something to a large deal, or something that's been therapeutic and it's removed, I think that's a difficult thing, because it's almost like, well, this is, my sanity has somewhat been tied to this. So it's almost like it's like taking medication away from someone who might need it for a condition.
So mid Jake's first thing, and I don't know why I'm so stuck on it, he said about accepting, and I agree, but like when you're not in your right mind, like how can you accept to make these right decisions? Right. Like if your mind is not in a good place, without freaking out to some degree.
Take time.
That's a great question. And yeah, excellent question. I do think I have some degree of context on at least picking at an answer towards that, or a potential path towards that. And it's that I think the worst advice you could possibly get is stop doing it. The best advice you can get is find a way to work around it. And I think if we want to get to practical advice to somebody who has an injury from just general perspectives, one of the things that I probably have my nutrition care process stuff to thank for is it's a very logical sequence of developing an intervention. And in this specific scenario with lifting, basically you have to first find the offensive problem. So usually someone's usually not hurt everywhere. And what that means is, like, let's just use an example of, like, maybe someone hurts their leg or their quad or something. The stupidest thing you can do is keep pushing it and saying, oh, it's just a small injury, it's only going to stay small. No, especially if that injury was created by the activity. Continuing to do the activity is going to be a problem if you don't let it heal. So no one's saying stop doing the whole, like, from a holistic perspective, the activity as a whole. Just stop doing the offensive movement, or develop a deductive process where you can get the closest exercise possible that's pain-free and do that until you get resolution. Again, specific example, maybe you have some kind of problem with the barbell back squat. So you'd start with something close to a back squat, maybe an alternative bar back squat. Maybe then like pin squats, maybe belt squats. And then if all of those are offensive, maybe your tendon's catching somewhere. Well, then you progress to things that are a further separation, like a leg press, like a machine, where some of that pressure you can change. So
there's a logical sequence in dealing with.
And the point is, not, again, if you're looking at it, you want to stop offending the tissue, but you don't want to remove the stimulus. Because if you remove the stimulus, then you detrain, which isn't not necessarily something that you have to do. Now, you tear your pec, obviously you can't train whatever pec is torn. Like, that's just a terrible idea.
That's a kind of important, I guess,
Separation
difference between something that happens chronically due to something you're doing over and over time, and a very acute, abrupt,
like severe injury. Yeah. But I do think a big thing is basically you first have to tease out the problem, and that could be a process that's not just a couple weeks or a month. I mean, with my back, I was just telling Jake before we started, it's been a year that, I mean, squatting, deadlifting has been hit or miss. Those have been literally like my lifeblood. But the thing is those injuries came from the act of lifting weights. I didn't get in a car accident or anything like that. Therefore, logically, if I correct the issue that I had with lifting the weights, I should be able to resolve it, because if there's a joint problem, obviously muscle is pulling joint to joint. So if I can kind of correct that issue back out through some type of specific, modality, then I've gotten closer to resolution, just haven't gotten completely there.
Yeah.
So I guess the point of that is, like, realize that it's a process. And the only real failure is giving up in it, because you can focus on other things. Like, for example, it's not my personal choice, but I'm still training. I mean, I'm doing bodybuilding training now because I can, and it still satisfies something. It's not. So I think a lot of times when something is taken away that you love, it becomes an all or nothing perspective.
Yeah.
Which I think can be a dangerous thing, because for this simple reason, and it's what it's taught me through force, is that, like, sometimes you can go back and be forced to do something that it wasn't the exact same means that you wanted to do it, but you learn something completely new just because you're looking at that old thing through a new lens.
Right.
So injuries can be a blessing. I mean, the reason I became obsessed with form on squatting is because of injuries. If I never got hurt,
be as efficient as you could.
Yeah. So yeah, I think your dysfunctions can be your blessings sometimes too.
Anything on that, Jake?
I don't think so.
Everybody, I don't know if you've added Jake. This is like the 10th fucking podcast. Everybody add Jake on Facebook. He's got a lip ring now. He's growing his hair out.
Yep.
He looks cool.
I look nothing like that picture anymore. Actually, you can't see my face in my profile picture.
Oh, the back.
Yep.
Yeah.
We call that the Egyptian lights out. The Tutankhamun.
Right. With his motorcycle.
I had one thing I wanted to throw
mine
in
was
there.
not at all related, so.
Yeah, I had one thing I wanted to run there. And this may sound so Ben accidentally bought two books, and I took the other one. What was the name of the book? Like finding the
Kinetic Anatomy?
No, it was
I did that myself.
It was what is it called? Like something logic. It was like math, like something solving the something or something like that.
Oh,
solving the something or something. Right.
That was the title. Yes.
That's good.
The
Verbatim.
F iteration snake. Anyways,
it's gonna bother me so you keep going. I'm gonna find out what the actual title.
But you need to hear me as
I'm listening. I can hear you.
Okay, so it was essentially mathematical something, right?
Ben has left the studio.
He's left the studio. And in this mathematical book, I was kind of skimming through it, and it was very early pages, and one of the first things I saw was like Pythagorean theorem. The book is called
How to Solve It.
In the microphone.
How to Solve It. A new aspect of mathematical method.
A very logical book. I'm sorry, who's the author for those who may...
It's funny you asked that, because I thought that this was an author who wrote another text that I really liked on herbs, but I tried to find his full name, and all you can find is G. Polya, I thought it was Gideon Polio because he wrote a book called
We need to all change our name to first
it's just
initial.
G. Yeah, just G Polio.
J Arms. Be back.
Be back.
And so anyways, getting to my point, I was all over it because it looked like something logical to me. It looked like it can help me in my thinking. Like if I can understand math, I can understand when we hear philosophers say reason, we're really tying that back to mathematics and logic. That's what they mean by reason. When something is taken, when you have an injury, it seems simple what Ben just said. But as you all know, you all have been in relationships where you lost people or you lost a something and you loved it. And the last thing you did was a logical sequence of events. And so my question really, if this can be answered, is that how does one not be dumb? How do you save yourself from yourself when you're having these lows? I mean, some of our best friends, you have had some major injuries, and I've seen the lows associated with it. You become a different person.
Yep.
Like you're not you anymore.
Yep.
And so how does one, from your experience at least, from Jake's experience at least, not save yourself from yourself?
Jake, you go first.
I think, the main thing is just to maintain appropriate perspective. I think I was just talking to Andrew Kutnick at Powerhouse the other day, and that's kind of the way he put it was like, well, do you kind of want the short-term disappointment of not hitting a lift or what have you, or making something even worse if you are worried about some sort of injury, like turning, tendonitis into tendinosis.
So here and now you have to accept some form of disappointment.
Yeah,
here
so
and now.
Kind of accepting that short-term disappointment, and kind of like Ben said, and finding a resolution instead of just kind of grinding through it and making it worse. And then, as opposed to having that long-term disappointment of just straight up, potentially not being able to train, I guess, depending how bad it is.
I think that injuries, as I kind of alluded to before, are beautifully packaged opportunities for perspective, meaning it really is kind of a life raft to show you a kind of self-reflective method to see really how much you were consumed by that activity.
Yeah.
When it's taken away, and you can have multiple choices to do it, and that's, I guess, just the way I chose to deal with it when it happens to me. And I guess see that it is a fork in the road. It's not a dead end, because maybe there's something else that you can work on and get good at while you're not spending so much time in the gym, while you're letting this thing heal. Like one of the things with back was I started doing guitar lessons and getting more lost in the music. And so now when the injury is healed, I at least have something to show for that time rather than just regret and frustration or, animosity at people that were able to lift and are able to lift. Or maybe it's just reading more about lifting or finding out how to solve your own issues, or just programming. Like, bottom line, I mean, and I think, Ryan, you kind of alluded this the last podcast too, was, or two ago, is that I really don't think that I would be, quote unquote, coaching as many people as I do in powerlifting without my injuries, because I would have still been trying to be the athlete. But the second thing is that, and this one, if there's one takeaway from what I've said, it would be, man, listen. If there's one thing to listen to people who are older than you, who've been powerlifting longer than you about, it is, you're probably going to get hurt. Take it seriously, because as you get older, you don't heal faster. And I remember when I first started getting into powerlifting, there's numerous high-level powerlifters, USAPL powerlifters that I spoke to, who were talking about their serious back injuries and stuff like that, and now they're no longer even lifting. And they told me seriously, and I was the young kid who was like, oh, they're wrong, I'm going to prove them wrong. And if not, you're going to be humbled. It's like that quote I told you, like, he who is exalted will be humbled, and I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to screw it up, so.
No,
I feel like, I don't even remember. What was the start of that question that he just answered?
How do you basically save yourself from yourself for not being stupid? That was a big question.
Yeah. I feel like in other aspects of life, we like idolize those people so much who don't. Because I think
Great point.
I think how Ben started was like, kind of saying, God, what was like the first thing you said?
Perspective, opportunity, and then the second thing was listen to people.
Yeah, like listening to people, and God, I can't remember now. Man, I can't remember, but like something along the lines of like taking it slowly, or taking a step back. But which obviously makes sense in regards to injury, and I guess training. But yeah, as I was saying, I feel like in other activities, like we idolize those people who kind of, I guess, like work themselves to death.
Yep.
Or like, or what you said was like be consumed, like how consumed by the activity you are. And we kind of put those people on a pedestal who are very highly consumed by what they do, and like, I don't know, you hear stories of like about sleep deprivation, which is a whole other issue. I feel like people talk about that now like it's some kind of like badge of honor, like how little they sleep. But
so I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like
like that kind of stuff, or like they got like exhaustion sickness, and they forgot to eat or do anything, and like, man, they work so hard, like, but we put like a very positive spin on that.
We do. I never noticed that. We do have a positive connotation to that.
So like people try to, when people I guess, I don't know, like maybe everybody does this, but I feel like it's more prevalent in America, so or the US, when people try to apply that mentality to lifting, it's not good.
I think that's hard because we apply that, like you said, to everything, and on a deeper level, like that comes from our ideologies. Like that's classic Alexander the Great. I'm an invincible Macedonian. Like people don't even know where Macedonia is anymore. Like Macedonia used to rule the earth, and in the same, the guy who ran from Marathon to Athens, he ran 26 miles and collapsed and died. Like it's embedded in our American and Western culture, like these great Greek stories of hubris that they made it, and like it's fucking folklore though. Like Thor is not a guy. Like that didn't happen. Like, and I think we have these romanticized versions of what masculinity or what toughness or what grinding or what like outworking is, and that we say things like the human can push past certain limits, but it also tells you things very early. Like if something's hurting, it's not an accident. It's not just you don't ever say, "Oh, my knee's hurting today because I haven't
phenomenon for nothing." Well, I really think at the heart of it, it's what we like about it is it grants us the permission, bias, I'll call it, to continue to indulge in this thing that we wanted to anyway. But it's like the classical cherry picking of information where, well, this person does it and they're successful.
Yeah.
And but it works until it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. And The problem is what happens when you apply that false logic to yourself from that inappropriate comparison, and then they're still lifting and you're not anymore. Then you're totally lost, and you feel like you're just kind of floating in, like the vacuum of space, with no real means to get yourself recentered. And I think something that's really important, and it's kind of a theme of every single one of these podcasts, is man, you kind of have to develop a perspective of who you are, not who you want to be relative to the people that you look up to. It's okay, obviously, to have fitness idols or fitness people who motivate you, but you kind of still have to understand whether you're better or worse than that person, you're not that person.
Yeah. That's somebody I've recently started following. He has a book, a New York bestseller book, Crush It. Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary V's like the little jams or big jams. Gary V came out with he has this thing, and he says, if there's like the biggest thing I wish I could give everybody, like you don't even need to read this book. He said, just stop right here if you can do this. The biggest thing I wish I can give everybody is the gift of like a true self-objective analysis of themselves.
Yep.
And it's Thursday, 1:16 a.m. and we're podcasting. We woke up, we work, we just work. We have a culture of work in De Novo. And I was thinking, I just kind of had an existential moment. I was listening to you guys talk, and like I had a weird and I swear I'll get back on topic. Like I had a weird kind of brain glitch. Like you guys were speaking, and I was like, "Holy shit! I'm not smart enough to keep up with this." And I can imagine that like if someone doesn't talk on this level normally, that you can feel like, you know what I mean? Like you would probably think these guys are smart. I think we're all pretty fucking stupid in our own way. Like yeah. But anyways, to not lose track, it's that people don't want to do what they're strongest at. Like the reason Jesse Norris squats 6 times a week and just doesn't get hurt is just because that's just his cards. He just doesn't get hurt. I don't know why, he just doesn't. Like, so he can go through and push through. The reason certain people can grind through and do these things is because that's just what that one person can do. And I think we should stop romanticizing as if we're that. Like, yep. We're just not that, and you just have to know who you are.
And maybe you could do something that person can't do.
And
like,
that's exactly. And that's what I was saying about our work. Like, yep. Like, dude, we can't. None of us can train on that level. None of us will ever be able to. But like, yep. I guarantee you, a lot of those guys can't work the way we can, or think creatively daily the way we can. And like, we're not special. We just play to our classic Tim Ferriss. We play to our strengths. Classic Steve Vai as well. And so I think with injury, you're not a New Zealand rugby player. Like those guys were bleeding and they're on the court, on the field with blood on, and they're just toughening it out. Like I could never be a boxer. If I got hit once, I get the Ronda Rousey.
Have you ever had like somebody just accidentally like swat you in the nose?
Dude, I can't.
It hurts.
I have a glass jaw. Like I'm not made for that. Like I could probably be a good fighter, but as soon as I get one hit, all my training's out the window.
All right, fuck, I'm done. Just take the ring. Just walk
I can't focus. Like I can't focus, dude. There's no way.
That's like the one bad deadlift. All right, I'm done training.
I'm done. Is there anything to be said, I guess, physiologically? I'm going to change direction, so if you guys have anything else, don't let me change direction.
Go ahead, yeah.
For, like, injuries, bearing through injuries and people's individual, like, pain threshold, I know Jake and I have talked. I'm very, very, very slight on pain thresholds. I think we had one small... It was like 30 seconds long. We talked about, like, pain thresholds.
I mean, there's got to be some individual like variability in like nociceptors, I would imagine.
Yeah, there definitely
like
is.
how they function.
What are those? Explain.
Those are that's a specific name for pain receptors.
So it's called a nociceptor?
No, it's nociceptors.
Nociceptors?
Yeah.
NOCI. scepter.
and they are and
Jesus.
and they specifically
NOCI and then a sword.
and they and they specifically send pips to the brain.
Yes. That's how you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. News to me. Is there any data that says there's variability?
Yeah, I could. That's a total guess. So like,
I'm
I don't
putting
know.
you guys.
It's
on
just
the spot.
something I could imagine being truthful. Just
I know there is. I can't cite the work, but I know there is because of the 23andMe, because that's actually assessed on there, and everything, every genotype.
Explain the 23andMe.
So 23andMe is something I would have wholeheartedly recommended people do before the FDA decided to intervene. Now, I don't think it's quite as, it's definitely not as robust as it used to be, but basically it's genotyping. So they send you a swab kit. It's like $100. They send you a spit kit, as they call it, and you spit into it, you send it in, and they take a small section of your genome, and then from that they can kind of get some data on associations with certain diseases, because they can, I believe, man, this is a while since I've read up on it, but genotyping is much different than fully sequencing your genome. Fully sequencing your genome would still super expensive. Genotyping, basically they take a small section of it, and from that they can, I think, kind of, there are some assumptions involved, but you get back quite a few results on health, on basically phenotype things. So basically like hair type, eye color, obviously some things that you would know, some others that aren't superficial that you might not know, like responses to certain different drugs, different diseases that run in your kind of lineage, and then also where your ancestors kind of migrated from. But one of the things that they do actually have on there is pain tolerance, and there are certain genotypes that are associated with either lower pain thresholds and higher, and I do believe that it's actually associated with dopamine functioning, and I'm actually lower, because dopamine is actually a analgesic, partly why the tope effect is you actually do get a little bit of pain relief from that.
When you take our product, you don't feel any pain. Money back guarantee. No, that's true.
But it's part of the high from opioids, is because they are so it's why people, obviously there's other reasons why people like opioids, like heroin and stuff, or morphine, but one of the things is that you do get,
this is kind of a again, it's not our area, a genetic on the spot question. Is there anything that shows like certain genetic haplogroups have more of like a pain tolerance?
That's a great question.
Than others. I'm not it's very broad.
I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some associations, just like there are, like, for example, like hypertension in African American. That's a correlation like that we can tease out. So
seems like, this is totally random, seems like it'd be better to evolutionary better to be more pain resistant in a colder climate.
So the reason why I asked the question about
well,
a haplogroup is essentially like a genetic group from a region, and they're all very similar. So like my haplogroup is West African, essentially, is where I'm mostly genetically from, although I'm American, right? So I thought about this because I was thinking like Russian white dudes are amazing at taking pain. And I was like, what is it about that you know what I mean? That it's like, and you hear about these their training, and it's like these dudes have to be banged up. Like we hear about these Russian methods and all these things.
The Bulgarian thing too.
And
And
the
it's
other
like,
thing
what
is you're seeing the people that like have
that
survived.
But and that actually was kind of the basis of Bulgarian training, is that The people who make it to the top are the ones who actually just made it through. And
so what is the process of this? And for people who would maybe suffer injuries, as much as we know, right? The people who would suffer injuries throughout this process, and with the government helping, subsidizing lifters. So
but that's kind of interesting. Like, that just kind of goes, just the fact that they do that, like, just kind of goes to show, like, this is meant for some people.
Exactly.
It's probably not meant for other people.
Let's make a perfect,
or at least to a certain
right.
workload degree.
A perfectly, I think, appropriate analogy, given that most people who are listening probably have seen my lankiness and Ryan's compactness and LS's compactness. And if you just looked at us structurally, there is no doubt, based on from a pure mechanics perspective and levers perspective, I will have a much higher risk of herniating a disc in my lumbar spine than either of you, because you're so much more compact. So there's no doubt that there's weeding out just based on phenotypical traits. You asked something else though. Like the Russian.
Yeah.
I do think
the pain in haplogroups.
Yeah.
I was saying.
I think though that's also, I think there's a big cultural influence on that too.
Yeah, very true. Must be strong.
Yeah,
that whole thing.
It's something to be proud of, but obviously I can't speak at length at that because I've never been in that culture. That's based on perception of that culture.
Yeah, what they like to present as the winners, most anyways.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think I said that because that's part of dealing with an injury as well. Is your ability based off, it may be tying this all together, it may be a genetic thing on how you actually feel and receive pain, and how bad you complain. And I thought about that hospital chart when the nurse comes in, she's like, "Tell me about your pain today,"
Yep.
and it's like, and some people are. My mom were like, "How are some people 9s every day?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, how can you be a 9 every day?
Hedonic scale, I think.
Like, and you're fine. Like, you're going home tomorrow. Like, there's no way you're a 9. And
or they're just saying that, help me more.
I don't want to go home.
So between that and a culture perception of how you deal with pain, I think that will say a lot on a fundamental level how you will deal with your injury mentally.
So I do think there's again, I think that's an excellent point. I do think there's something additional to run off of that point, is that how much something that is, if you are a very analytical person, or maybe let's say potentially neurotic or obsessively detailed, I think that it can be to some degree a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like if the person who's constantly looking for the injury, if you're constantly looking for almost anything, you can find something that feels off, and then it's almost like, and again, I can't state to have read research about this, but I think from a purely logical perspective, you can create a certain perception of pain by thinking about it and obsessing over it too. So I think that's something definitely to keep in mind with this whole conversation too, is certainly don't try to block it out, but if you're looking for it and all you could think about is everything always being wrong or something always hurting and being nagging, it could to some degree be a mental thing too.
Yeah, very true.
I think that's something important that kind of comes along with just training age.
Experience or actual age?
Like training age, so like the amount of time that you've trained. Just knowing like what is good and like literally knowing what is good pain, what is bad pain. Because a lot of times when people first start lifting, and they'll do like deadlifts or something, and they'll feel something in their lower back,
Get tight.
and they get scared that they're going to injure themselves. But it's kind of like, well, I can't be in your body, but at the same time, it's like, okay, you do have muscles in your lower back, and yeah, it can get tight when their blood starts going there. So knowing the difference between like that and like, okay, like it feels like I just like
Right.
pulled my back or like something like that.
I think that that reminds me of like how when there's unfortunate like drunk driving accidents, the drunk driver always lives because they didn't give a fuck going into it, and the person that was so overly thought about how to brace for this accident is the one who gets in a bad position and dies. And I think that ties into the type of athlete you are as well too. Like we talk about LS a lot because he's one of our athletes, but like, man, LS is like something will be hurting, but oh man, don't worry about that. Yep. Like it's all like, and I'm like, in my mind, I would have thrown myself off.
It would be more appropriate for him to wear chainmail on the platform than a singlet.
yeah, like
it's come in on a chariot.
But that's the type of athlete that he is, and I think the combination of all these things are important. Like when talking about injuries, like so we've discussed like how do you actually receive pain, the culture of what is your culture of pain? Is it okay? Like my mom, if I would complain about something, my mom told me 9 times out of 10, that's not true. No, you're not sick. Go to get up, get dressed. Like I'd be sick. Like, and the combination of that and I think that makes, and I guess it's kind of building as I'm talking. This is not definitive. This is just my loose theory in my head. The type of athlete you are, depending on, will you be the type of person to injure yourself? Will you be able to pick up on these cues? What's real pain? What's bad pain? Like my knees have been hurting squatting, and I know they're hurting from inactivity because I haven't been squatting. Yep. And I know the difference of a real pain and I just haven't done anything type of pain.
Yeah, people have a real hard time distinguishing. I guess it's because of like I've played high school football between like is that just like a boo-boo or like, you know, but they used to say just like rub some dirt on it, or like is this something that actually merits serious further consideration and deep thought? And again, you have to make that distinction.
My brother, my older brother, he was the oldest brother of me and my other brother, the three of us, and he would always say this thing that was mind-blowing to me, and he would say, we'd be like, oh my God, we'd get hurt, like, oh, and we'd cry, like, I think I broke my arm, and he would always say, if you broke your arm, you know. And we would say, how do you know? Because you know. And that was his thing, and it's so true. Like, if you broke your leg, there would be no question. Yeah. Like, it would be like, I think it's definitive.
And that's, I think that's a fairly good subjective assessment that is appropriate, is that is this thing chronic? Obviously, so that situation, if your bone is popping out of your skin, obviously it's
merely a flesh wound.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a little pippy.
But if you have a concomitant rise in pain over time with the activity, and it's gradually getting worse and worse, I think that's a pretty clear sign as well that you have some kind of dysfunction going on. And I think the biggest thing when you do become cognizant of something being off is to not just disregard it continually, because I do kind of have a fear now. I go to certain meets and I watch people compete, and they justify, well, I don't know if I can finish, and then they kind of grit it out. I don't know the lifespan of being able to grit it out as you get closer to your 30s and beyond.
Yeah, I think again though,
that's kind of a weird gamble, because it's almost like, well, I don't go for the lift and I have greater longevity in the sport, but I'm gonna have to stop lifting at some time anyway. So like, will I ever hit that again?
It's just like a relationship, man or woman. It doesn't matter. Like, it feels good and it feels dumb. Yeah, it feels good. Like, I don't care. I know it's not good for me. Like, and it's the same thing. Again, that's why I tied it to Plato's Symposium, because like there is much crossover with love of things and love of people. Like, they're very similar traits. And I think people yeah, I don't do this, but I love it. God, I hear you, man. I hear you, but like, what was that song Eve had? Love is blind, it'll take over your mind. Like literally, it will ruin you. Like if you're not careful, and you can't let your, I'm sorry, illogic of love make your logical decisions. Would be logical decisions, I guess I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like the momentary decisions can actually become they can dictate your future outcomes. Particularly meets are a period of emotional high.
Yeah.
But Jake, that was a great kind of rebuttal to it as well. And I think, I guess, to say maybe from a handling or coaching perspective, I would personally say that the only job is to let the person be aware of the long-term potential ramifications, but that's their decision to make.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear that when they're in love, though.
They don't.
No.
So I think we still haven't answered, and it's hard for any of us to answer your question. How would you stop someone from being stupid? So perspective, we've said, and we've kind of went off on that. Actual steps,
Dude,
right?
you're talking about stopping someone from being stupid?
I wish you could see Jake's face right now.
We're going to build a wall from you
Love
against
'em.
yourself.
Mexicans love them.
A wall between you and the platform.
Powerlifters, I love them. Love powerlifters.
I actually have a goal.
It's going
My
to be
first
huge.
For my first meet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 225 on the squat rack. It's going to be my first attempt on squat. And I'm going to rack it out. And I'm just going to walk backwards. And I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to see how far I can get before they stop me. I'm going to do my walkout and then just keep going.
Just keep breathing and breathing.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna squat at some point. I don't know if there's a rule book in the USAPL that says you have to squat on the platform because I think it's so obvious. Like I
Yeah.
think it's so obvious. I don't think there's a rule.
I
that
just
says
don't
that.
know how far they would let you go.
You do usually have a backdrop
Backdrop behind you.
But
Back
yeah, you
spotter.
definitely have a back spotter. But
Just bump into it. Or just shuffle off to the side.
it'd be great to take your 3-step walkout and then go one to the left, get your air brace, and then start again and keep going in an L pattern.
and keep saying
Yeah.
things like you're gonna lift. Yep. And just
Yeah,
like keep acting like you're getting ready. And then the dude's hand's gonna be up.
Just slowly keep shuffling back what? No.
All right. Nope.
The fucking
nope.
audience. Let's go, Jay!
yeah, exactly.
Oh, you run out of time. You have a
Yeah,
minute.
that's true.
Yeah.
But what are they gonna do?
We'll get pretty far in a minute.
What are they gonna do? What are they gonna do? Take the bar off of you?
Probably.
I don't know, man. Keller might get you.
He
Oh
would.
man.
Yeah.
Now he knows.
He's waiting.
We're gonna have to find out.
I was gonna say something actually useful, but I forgot. Now.
That's pretty useful.
Yeah, we got some use out of that.
Well, I think I was gonna what about practical stuff?
That's
So,
what I was gonna ask. Then.
Yeah.
What the
Oh
fuck?
no! First, we were talking. You were talking about how to stop somebody from being stupid.
Yeah. See.
Yeah,
Tell me.
So I kind of raised my eyebrows when you said that because I don't know if you can. Dude, I think Ryan and I have had this conversation before, and I think maybe Ben was there. But anyway,
You might. I don't fucking know.
Dude, I credit you with so many conversations.
thanks, man.
I'm like, oh yeah, I was talking to Jake about this, and I was like, you were talking to me about that. It's like, oh. Yeah. Anyways, I was talking to Jake.
You might have been here. I don't know.
But it was I think we were saying watch I'll be watching somebody messing up and I just let them mess up. Bye. If it's something really really bad, I'll stop you. But I think a lot of the time dude, you just gotta learn on your own. Like, I learned a lot of crappy stuff, like, just by messing up and doing it the wrong way for a long, long time. And even just life stuff. So, if you're trying to apply that to lifting, I mean, you know, hopefully you will take our, advice of thinking about your future.
Yeah.
But a young dude, oftentimes it's guys, is they're just gonna be like, oh,
I'm the one. I'm the special one.
Yeah, exactly.
Testosterone makes you feel invincible, though.
So, sometimes you just gotta get smacked down, and then that's how you learn.
Then you're level. And I think not even so much like take advice from what we're saying, but we've talked about Dawkins a lot on these podcasts, and one thing we talked about in the I don't know, maybe the other second, I don't know if it was the last one, whatever's before the last, penultimate or something like that, whatever the word would be. We talked about simulation. Jake's talked about it specifically, and just from an advantageous survival standpoint, you should be smart enough to aggregate data from your women, people that you live with. So if you see this thing happening to an aggregate number of human beings, chances are it may happen to you too, because you're like genetically pretty much the same as any of them. I'm not saying that you will. I'm not saying that there's not outliers. Obviously, like some people are just amazing with certain things that they differentiate in. But I think for the most part, don't be dumb and look around. Like literally, from a practical standpoint, like all these people aren't growing up in their life and saying, "Oh, I hate my job. I hate my life." Well, don't do it. Don't do what they did. Like don't do. Like you can learn a lot from people's mistakes.
This is kind of off topic, but sometimes I think half of life is just being aware. Like, people are just not aware of what is going on. Just kind of mini rant.
I don't think there's any need to be aware, really, because like
that's the point. Big Brother will take care of you.
Man, they'll take care of you good. That's oh my God, we're getting off topic. Who cares? That's like the fundamental. Like Maslow had this book. It was called The Further Reaches of Man, I think. And like Abraham Maslow, we've talked about a few times, and he published a lot of great research. And towards the end of his life, he basically put together a collection of memos, and it basically started off like, look, this is just some shit. I think it's true. Like, I'm not sure. I don't have time to run it through. Like, I'm just going to write it. And he just went in on people. Like, we need to stop idolizing people. Like, anyone can self-actualize. And he said the biggest thing is that it starts with like self, because the world can give you everything. It can give you food, it can give you safety, it can give you love, it can give you like the world will give you an easy handout. But where you're going to be stuck, and it's basically sounds like Pinterest, dreams, where you're going to be stuck on dreams is when you don't know yourself, like when you haven't observed enough, when you haven't analyzed enough. Like, you'll like, dude, it's so easy to make money and just kind of live and be happy, but you're never gonna self-actualize if you never take the time to, like you said, what half of life really is. And that's what Maslow argued for. Like, we need to stop saying like, oh, I'd love to be smart like Ben, but that's Ben. Like, putting people, or like, I can't be Michael Jordan, that's Michael Jordan. Like,
but I think that's perfect, and it brings it back to the thought where you asked if we had anything to add, which I kind of held, hoping that it would kind of come back. And it's just, I think, let's classify all of these socially, let's call them worshipped traits, as talent, as opposed to saying intelligence, athletic prowess, wealth, anything like that. I think it's much simpler than that, which is that you're not, most people, unless you actually have a chromosomal issue, are not dumb. You can learn. It's more so not a lack of innate ability, but a lack of action. And
You're not paying attention.
right, well, the problem is that it's just like what you said, Ryan, is that like this person I'm going to use as this pillar of an example of this one thing I value and want to have. What do you usually say? Is you usually don't take action because you say, I can't have that because I'm not worthy. It's stupid. And the reason it's stupid is you can find out. Take fucking action if you want to find out. Because then you'll actually get your answer rather than just stopping before you start.
But here's the thing, and even why I say just pay attention first, because you're not even going to know, like, you're not even going to notice, like, what should I take action, like, what should I, like, you need to pay attention to yourself, your surroundings, and I don't know, like, what were you going to say?
All I'd really say is that's part of taking action, though.
Yeah.
Is because you're working towards it.
Yeah, that is really an action.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The last point is just that not taking action is just being passive and saying, I want that, and then moving on.
Yeah.
Like, action is just pursuing something related to that, to the path.
True.
But I think, and I'll tie this into an injury thing, into back into this. So today, we were lifting at MI40, which is Ben Picalsi's awesome gym. Shout out to Ben. And it was just Ben and I in there tonight, and Adam. And I was benching alone, and I've been having, since Raw Nationals, I've been having like a bit of just inflammation in my what is this, humerus ball and joint thing here? Glenohumeral, yeah.
It's one of my favorite joint names.
Yeah, it is a good one.
It sounds like a gentleman. And so I had some inflammation in both of them probably 3 weeks out, and I was like, well, I'm at about 95% once a week, like it makes sense, right? And so after nationals, I was like, okay, I won't bench for about 2-3 weeks. I've been benching, I started benching in probably last week, and the right one's good, and the left one's still having some issue, like just slight tendonitis. It almost feels like, and of course I'm like, okay, I don't want tendinosis, so I'm already thinking to myself, for this first block of...
Let's just define that really quick, because I know we use it twice, just in case people don't know the difference. So tendonitis is acute inflammation, itis, that's just a suffix for really any inflammatory issue. And then tendinosis is when you actually induce chronic changes to the tendon structure, so usually you get some type of calcification. So you don't want either, but you definitely don't want osis, because now you have a chronic long-term change in the morphology of the tendon.
And if you are still at a stage where it's tendonitis, this ties into the pay attention and do all you can to stop it while it's still, before it becomes tendinosis, because it's a lifelong problem now. So essentially I benched today, and I recorded myself from the back angle, and I recorded myself from the front angle. And I was paying attention to what I was doing. My left, I wish you guys can see my hands. My left hand is slightly more bent backwards than my right. I mean, maybe a quarter of an inch. I mean, ever so slightly. And that is actually carrying into my back arch, and my left, well, if singular, scapulae, is slipping out of place to some degree, and it's putting pressure on that ball and socket, I guess it would be called. And I figured this out today. Now, here lies the fundamental issue. When I was a kid, I used to fucking daydream all day in school. I never paid attention. I didn't even know how to use a syllabus till like my junior year in college. Like, I had no clue how to do it. So for me, naturally, to just execute and just take action, it makes sense. I've never listened to the system.
Yeah.
But most people, they wouldn't even know how to go against the rules and say, maybe I don't bench this first block. Maybe I do dumbbell presses or something instead to have a more neutral grip. That's probably what I'm going to have to do at this point. I'll be fine in like 5-6 weeks, I'm sure, if I just put my frequency down to twice a week from 3 and do something like that. And I came to this entire conclusion by things I have read previously, thinking on my own volition, and just really recording off of a cell phone. I mean, nothing really major. And I made that decision. And again, it's all through awareness. And I'm trying to prevent a major injury by being aware. What these gentlemen were saying about not having a pippy, not what they're saying.
Yeah.
I really like that word.
Hippie.
Yeah, I like it. About avoiding injury through action. I think it's hard for a lot of people because they're not natural action takers, because we've talked about it in do you need the institution or does the institution, you know,
Yeah, like you're ashamed for being a self kind of
yeah it's
self-thinker.
hard. It's hard when you haven't. It's like if you have this dog and you've had this dog for 8 years and you're like, all right, dog, let's backflip today, and the dog's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I've never backflipped. Like, I've always done whatever I've wanted to do my whole life.
Well,
So
yeah, if you've been kind of given like spoon-fed institutional answers or direction for a lot of your life.
dude, when people when people like, oh, my humerus, what's humeral? What's it called?
Glenohumeral?
Yeah.
Glenohumeral humeral.
Glenohumeral.
Glenohumeral.
Yeah.
Gleno. Sounds like an Australian
It's
nickname.
so
Gleno.
it's our friend. It's our Irish friend Gleno, and okay.
Glenoby, oh Glenoby. You look hungry, Glenoby.
God.
He's back.
Yeah,
Yes.
tell him about that. I created this character. I have to tell him about that. I created this Irish character when I would get inebriated is not the proper word, but I would be okay, and I would feed these guys all food, donuts, whatever,
Feasting.
and I would turn into an old drunk, either Welsh or Irish, depending on my mood. Lost father who's lost his son, and he's 100% convinced that Jake needs to eat.
The only
That was
way you
Jake's
can make
bulking
him
face.
better is if you eat.
That's,
I think I gained
yeah.
like 10 pounds during that.
Yep. The only way
There's
you
a
can
fact
make
is-
this old Irish man feel better is if you just have a bite, bye. Just have a bite, lad.
And now Jake has diabetes.
Yeah. And I'm dead.
Have a bite for an old man, bye.
I got a pippy hip.
You know what I think is funny, and if we can stop the podcast here if we don't want to discuss it, but I think it brings up actually an interesting point that I do think might be kind of fascinating to anyone listening from a biomechanical perspective. Just what you noticed, what you said you noticed today, and why that actually, why little things add up, especially when you're lifting, primarily doing the compound lifts with a very high external load, is the weight is held distal usually to the primary movers. So what happens is if you think about a golf club and you see guys do longest drive contests, or usually the best drivers, or let's just take it out to an extreme example. If you've ever seen like funny golf clubs, like guys who want to just drive distance and make this extremely long shaft of a golf club, you can drive much longer. Yes, your accuracy is hurt by it, but you can drive the ball much longer by increasing the length of the lever. Because what happens is the more distal you put the point of impact, the more velocity you get distal. So if the primary movers are your shoulder joints or your hips, the further away you make the impact point, the more velocity you get at the head of the club. It's almost like the same as imagining, picture someone like kind of twirling a ball on a rope by spinning. If they have a short rope or a long rope, obviously if you get hit by either rope, you're going to know. But it's going to be the long one that's going to hit you with more force. So the point in bringing all of it up is that a very small change in something as simple as the way you grip the bar, because it's distal, it will impact the force on the joint much differently. And the same thing happens for something like a knee, a hip, in a squat. It's the same concept. Is the further, and this also ties into why usually people with short torsos are better squatters, because they have more stability. When you make the torso length much longer, now you increase the shear force when you get down to the depth of the squat. And obviously that's a big debate we've seen over, like torso flexion in the squat, when not everybody can high bar squat like Indian, whatever his name is, that Olympic squatter on YouTube
Right,
who does
yeah.
like looks like a piston going up and down.
Yeah.
He's so efficient. So yeah, I mean that this can all be boiled down to, I guess, physical phenomena, but to bring it all back together, part of taking action is being observant.
Right.
And if you do have a problem, the best thing you could do is either have a trusted eye look at it or record it and just see. Like, you can usually see pretty easily a movement that's erratic.
I was so is there any salvation for the, I guess, less efficient person in a biomechanic sense, in like kind of fighting against their injuries? And I guess we all have a lift that we're just not the best at in terms of like, Jake, you hate squats now, right? Do you still hate squats?
Yes,
And you like deadlifts?
they're okay.
Why?
Why do I hate?
Why have you been disliking squats? Why have you been liking deadlifts? And I'm asking a leading question, obviously, that you know the answer to.
Well, I don't like squats because relative to my torso, I have longer femurs and I have to bend over quite a bit in order to.
It activates the pip.
It activates the pip quite a bit.
Get that pip nice and hot.
In relation to that, actually,
icy hot on that pip.
Being aware about things, is that looking at that impingement actually through the X-ray copy that I was able to get, and kind of analyzing the structure of my hip socket, I was kind of able to determine that doing wider stance squats or and I tried gave sumo a real good shot for a while, but eventually that started to bother me a lot too, is that structurally what seemed to be causing it majorly was squatting with a bit of a wider stance and my knees traveling outward a little bit more, my femur basically banging on the acetabulum, and causing that bone to be aggravated, and it eventually remodels, and it basically makes a spike, like coming out of my hip, and that's what basically an impingement is. So yeah, I guess along with being aware and kind of trying to fix things for yourself, I just kind of realized through that that changing things to doing changing my deadlift back to conventional, while it doesn't feel as great on my back, I'm not getting weird kind of like razor pains in my hips and quads, and also the same thing with squat. It seems to be that if I go a little bit narrower, it helps, but again, that's the trade-off. Since I'm structural, due to my structure, I have to tilt more. I need more hip flexion in order to hip depth. So my back is taking a little bit more brunt of that torque. But that's why I don't really like squat. So right now, what I've started doing is kind of trying to find a happier medium, which is trying to stay narrower, staying a little bit more upright, and then letting my knees track forward a little bit more. And then I found some things to kind of help my knees, but that's really all I've been doing with that. Deadlift is a little bit better, but if you look at my conventional deadlift,
Yeah.
I am still pretty far, like my start position, my back is pretty horizontal still, so
Yeah, it is.
it's not great. I just have managed to just be strong in that movement, and my lower back just got really strong.
Right.
But there was a time when it broke.
So you've just basically instead of saying, "Oh, this hurts," I'm going to just. God, there's somebody I just thought about. I'm just gonna keep lifting on it.
I'm out of the loop on this one.
Well, let me. I guess I'll just come in there because I think that's something that I've always said, just watching other people lift, is that I guess there's 2 points. One of them being that there's a certain way that the lift should feel. It shouldn't feel like you're fighting yourself and the bar and or gravity. It should feel like you're basically just fighting gravity.
You guys are one thing.
Yeah. And so that is an intrinsic feel. You can also have an extrinsic perspective, which is, does it look like you're the guy on that keyboard game? What's that called? The running game that's really hard? Yeah, Quap. Where you're just, if you don't know, you need to look up that reference because you'll get it immediately when it's QUOP. It's like a computer based thing of how you have to coordinate to run, and it looks very uncoordinated. If you watch playback of a video and you literally look like you're fighting yourself and you feel like it too, that's a pretty clear sign. And then from there, like you asked, is someone doomed who just has poor leverages? I think doomed to some degree, but I think you can always do better usually than the poor starting point. And usually that means, that's the beauty of variations on the theme. Like, certain people get upset about sumo deadlifts being legal. Well, I mean, it's definitely safer for different body types. Sure, more efficient too, but come on, it's lifting weights. Like,
there's a lot of stuff that goes in just besides obviously besides just your skeletal structure.
Right.
I mean, I may not have the greatest skeletal build, but I can add a lot of muscle tissue. So obviously that helps.
Definitely. Again, something that I'm going to inappropriately just insert into here just because I've been thinking about it, and it is relevant. I was just thinking about back problems and individuals with, and it actually feeds directly into your point, with unique insertions, especially for hamstrings, because the typical cue is kind of keep your back flat on a deadlift, don't try to force arch. Well, why is that? And I wish I can visualize, and maybe we'll make a video on visualizing why it is. But if you have very short hamstrings, that means they're going to be tight very often. So what's going to happen is you have two things potentially pulling tension on your pelvic girdle. One of them is where all of literally the muscles of the hip and lower back attach, even like your lats attach there too, and then your hamstring too. So if you try to force arch by contracting your lower back muscles, at a certain point, those muscles at end range of motion cannot keep tension, so they're going to loosen. And now if you have inherently strange attachments, short attachments on the hamstring, they're always tight, that's going to take over and pull, and you're going to get rounding at the bottom because of that attachment. So yes, it's not just skeletal, it's also musculotendinous too. So yeah, I do think certain people, I guess this whole thought came from questioning my own cue calls to certain individuals, and actually looking on Instagram with somebody who was keeping an amazingly arched back at depth, who just had the right anthropometrics to do it. So yeah, there's general things for exercise execution, and it's not always one size fits all. It's things that you want to be looking for, meaning like you don't want to see a huge change in torso flexion during the movement. If someone could stay locked in a stable position, that's stability, that's safer.
Yeah.
Were there the trying to think about them. The things we've talked about today, if we had to like put them in like and I know you, Ben probably especially hates when I do this. The key things we've talked about today. So we've talked about awareness, kind of in oneself.
Yep.
We touched on.
We talked about kind of the process of dealing with an injury, kind of developing an intervention and logical steps.
That was probably one of my favorite parts, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Don't be stupid. That's actually pretty powerful. Like, don't be stupid. And it's weird because this is actually something I've heard you say a lot. You're like, yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. It's probably stupid. But you do it anyways.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it's like,
yep.
And that's everyone's biggest thing, is to not be stupid. Like, I remember one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life was one time Jake came here, and he came in the middle of traffic, and I knew I was like, why would he do that? Like, you knew before you left, like, it was a bad thing to do.
I blame Reggie.
And then he was so frustrated when Jake hates traffic. Everybody, add him on Facebook and then figure out where he's at, and then cut him off in traffic. He loves that. Don't you love that, Jake? He loves when you cut him off, especially if you're from Tampa.
Nobody waves here.
I always do the wave. Even someone lets me in.
I always wave.
You guys are from like good old eastern Pennsylvania, and where are you from? On the
Western Michigan.
Western Mich. Kalamazoo. How close are you from Kalamazoo?
Dude, I don't know. I think it's like 40 minutes, 30 minutes.
It's within proximity. Yeah. All right. So key takeaways here, guys. If you've listened to the whole thing, be aware of oneself. Have a logical intervention. Don't be stupid. And I think our final thing, unless I'm forgetting one, was it execution? Like our proactivity of some degree we talked about.
Yeah. Don't be passive.
Yeah.
In the process. And then I think after that we just kind of talked about just anthropometrical differences and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Good. So a lot of you, this may not seem pertinent to you if you haven't gotten an injury, and I've been there too. Like it's like when you hear about cancer as an 18-year-old and you just don't care, because it's not pertinent to you or anyone in your life.
It will be if you're powerlifting and getting stronger.
If you're lifting weights and you want to do it over a lifetime, you can play soccer. It will be something you have to deal with over a lifetime. So, hopefully, again, not from us, but we wanted to give it to you from a perspective of people who have been there. And don't end up as the guy in the back of the vitamin shop complaining on how his rotator is bad. The guys who actually got through it and we're still lifting and we're still here. And an example of that is Matt Gary. So check out Matt Gary.
Yeah.
If you don't, he's probably one of the most amazing. And Brad Cooliard as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Proud of both of them. So, but they probably haven't made it this far. So.
Hi, guys.
All right. Sign off from Pippi.
Adios.
Muchacho.
Goodbye.
Amigas.
Bye, nachos.